Right, now for this demonstration we're going to do a nice evening sunlit sky breaking through the clouds with shafts of sunlight and rays shining on the landscape below. Now I'm going to use the round brush for most of the demonstration, but I'm also going to use the flat brush when we come to pull out these shafts of sunlight. And although it might look a little bit scary, don't worry, it's quite straightforward and you just need a little bit of confidence to know what to do to make it work for you every time. So let's get going. Now the colours we're going to use are some raw sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue, but what I'm going to do now is do this cloud shadow mix here and just show you the proportions that we're going to need. So first thing I'm going to do is to put in a good strong mix of ultramarine. You can see that's quite strong, quite dense. Then we put in a little bit of light red. Now you can see it doesn't take an awful lot of light red to start dominating the ultramarine blue, and we're getting here a slightly purpley grey colour. But I'm just going to add a little bit of permanent rose and grey it off a little bit more. A little bit more blue. You can vary the proportions, of course, depending upon your personal preference. And what I actually tend to do is, as I'm putting this cloud shadow into the sky, I very often add a little bit more blue or red or whatever as I'm going along, so you actually vary the tones of the sky shadow from the red side towards the blue side. Now the only thing to remember here is see how relatively strong I've made this colour, because if you want to avoid cauliflowers in your skies, then always put the subsequent layers of colour on a little bit stronger than the previous ones. Right, so there we are. We've got a nice strong mix of ultramarine blue, light red with a little touch of permanent rose, and that gives us a lovely dense shadow colour, but it will lighten off quite a bit when we put it onto the damp paper. Now I'm going to add a simple little seascape to this particular sky so you can see the shafts of sunlight as they drop onto the water. Like many landscapes, when you put the sky in, you've got to bring the sky right down to the bottom of the paper. It may be a lot lighter here, but particularly where water's involved, as I've said before, you've got to get the water reflecting the sky colour. So it's always best to bring some of that sky colour down into this area here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is dampen the paper. I was going to say dampen the paper with clean water, but I've added a little bit of that cloud shadow colour to it, just so you can see where I'm putting it on a little bit easier. I'm quite happily leaving a few little flecks of dry paper here and there, and I'll explain why we do that in a moment. But I'm going to have the sun breaking through in this area here, so I want to leave that pretty dry. Now I've only made a little bit of ultramarine blue because really I only want a single light streak. There we are, you can see some of those flecks of unpainted paper now coming through. Now I've done that as a relatively pale ultramarine blue. Certainly it gets a lot paler because you've diluted it with the water that's on the paper. What I'm going to do now is take this much stronger mix of shadow colour and pull it out across most of the sky. Now I'm going to make that even stronger by adding some more light red and ultramarine. It's almost neat ultramarine and neat light right. It's almost neat ultramarine and neat light red. It's not easy to say that even with your own teeth. That's better, because that's going to dry quite light at the end of the painting. Now as I'm getting down towards the horizon, I want to lighten that off quite a bit to some distant, smaller and lighter clouds. So what I'm going to do is first of all put on a pale wash of raw sienna, and that will lighten off a lot more than you might think it will, to give me the lightest part of the horizon. I'm putting some in here because that's, believe it or not, is going to be where the light part of the sun is reflecting across the water. Right, I'm just going to lighten that off a little bit more now. So I've just literally swiped it across. I'm feeling brave, so I'll put a little bit of a blue mix into there. Give us another little streak or two of blue. Now I hope you can see that by creating this very light area which has had no paint or even water on it at all, it's setting us up quite nicely for a strong contrast area for the sun to be breaking through the clouds. Okay, now some smaller, gentler clouds in the distance. Right, that's worked quite nicely, and I'm going to leave that part of the sky now and let it dry. You can see that by putting that cloud shadow on, very, very dark when we started, how much it's lightened off. A, as it's dried, and B, because it's mixed in with the water that was already on the paper. You can see also here and here, for example, where there's been a bit more light red in the mix, where that's come through, and here where we've had a bit more ultramarine, where it's more of a bluey grey. So that's a very nice and subtle way that you can add variety into your skies, just by literally mixing the paint while it's on the paper. Right, whilst the sky is drying off, but we're still working in this area, I want to create a little bit of raw sienna to give a warmer glow to this part of the sky, so I can actually take the sun out with a combination of the brush and the paper towel. So I'm going to add in here just a medium strength mix of raw sienna, because what I want to create, if I can, is the hint almost of a silver lining on the edge of the clouds. I don't want it to actually go into the clouds if I can help it. It's gone in there. Now you can see that the yellow has actually run into that bit of the cloud there and lightened it off and started to spread. But I'm not worried about that, because what I'll do is I'll turn that to my advantage and create that as a shaft of light in a minute or two.